c'è un modo di ribellione all'Europa e di ribellione anche al governo dell'austerità di Mario Monti. Vediamo scendere in piazza delle persone, dei movimenti, gente in buona fede che in buona fede vuole cambiare questo disastro che si chiama Eurozona e dell'austerità. Purtroppo però molti di questi movimenti non hanno nessuna conoscenza di come realmente funzionano i sistemi monetari degli Stati, cioè di come realmente può funzionare un governo che lavori con il Ministero del Tesoro, che lavori con la Banca Centrale, per creare quell'economia che fa l'interesse pubblico del 99% delle persone. E allora ecco che, siccome tanta gente che si oppone all'austerità, all'Eurozona, non hanno in mano questo strumento, finiscono poi per disperdere delle energie che sono preziosissime in proposte che non stanno in cielo né in terra. Io non voglio svilire il lavoro degli altri, sto solo dicendo che mi rendo conto che questo è un problema che mi dà veramente quasi un'ansia fisica. Mi rendo conto che è una tragedia che in questo momento vadano disperse delle forze così importanti, semplicemente perché non abbiamo la possibilità di trasmettere il DNA dell'economia dello Stato a coloro che poi lo dovrebbero usare. Stiamo parlando di movimenti politici e sociali in Italia che ignorano l'esistenza del DNA, e il DNA del funzionamento dello Stato e della sua moneta lo ha scoperto Warren Mosler, descritto Warren Mosler. Allora, che cosa voglio dire rapidamente? Voglio dire che il nostro impegno dovrebbe essere, se vogliamo continuare a fare questa economia che oggi si chiama MMT, ma comunque che è l'economia di Warren Mosler, se vogliamo continuare a fare questa cosa, il nostro lavoro deve anche essere quello di riuscire a far capire a tutti coloro che in Italia in buona fede oggi si stanno mobilitando contro il disastro dell'Eurozona e dell'austerità che è imprescindibile, se vuoi curare il corpo umano, conoscere il DNA. E il DNA è l'economia di Warren Mosler. Non c'è niente da fare, non perché mi sta simpatico, solo perché Warren è qua e vuole essere carino con lui. Potrei anche dire che non è mio amico, non mi interessa. Il problema è che quello che lui ha descritto è il DNA dell'economia e non si può fare senza. Allora il mio invito è proprio questo: cerchiamo, magari senza essere arroganti, senza essere aggressivi, come oggi succede in internet, troppo spesso gli attivisti scrivono un lato, ma tu non hai capito niente, con superiorità, spocchia. Cerchiamo però di usare quello che abbiamo imparato qua, quello per dire ragazzi, siamo d'accordo con voi, facciamo questo movimento nazionale, il no Monti Day, tutta questa roba, ma cerchiamo di capire il DNA dell'economia, sennò guardate che andate a disperdervi in niente. Ok? Allora, detto questo, adesso do la parola a Warren che ci fa una serie di ritocchi su quello che abbiamo imparato ieri, ma abbiamo avuto un'idea che è piuttosto carina. Warren adesso si alza, ci dice alcune cose di nuovo sull'MMT, rapidissimo riassunto, però poi Warren ci dice: se io domani mattina divento il vostro Presidente del Consiglio, voi sardi, voi persone della Sardegna, se divento il vostro Ministro delle Finanze, ecco cosa faccio domani mattina per questa terra. Warren Mosler.
Eventualmente.
Oh, ho capito. Io riprendo una cosa e poi un'altra.
Sì. Così. Io ho lasciato.
Riprendi tu allora.
Continua tu.
Ah, continuo io, ok.
This is all a work in progress. We have a general outline, and then we talk to people, and we listen, and we hear the questions, and we try and arrange things so that we can best get the message across. This is not some kind of polished Wall Street corporate presentation where we prepare every last detail in advance and then go in trying to make the sale. We're here responding to people and listening, and we know the message that needs to get across, and we're trying to figure out how to do it. So this morning, I'm going to be taking the approach of what if I were appointed finance minister and the Prime Minister actually listened to me, right? What would we do? So what are the MMT type of proposals? The first thing we have to do, and let me just say we'll do them all at the same time, but the first part of the discussion, this would be maybe Saturday morning, because getting the plan together properly could take as much as 2 days. So we'll do it on a Saturday and Sunday, and then it'll all be revealed at the same time on Monday morning. First thing we have to do is decide what is the right size government. What do we want to do for the healthcare system? Do we want it this big or this big? What size do we want for the police? What do we want for education? What do we want for public works, for maintenance, for restoration of all the historic sites? What exactly do we want in a perfect world? Once we have decided what the proper role of government is, then we have to look at, okay, how many people is this going to take? Are there enough people in Italy to do all this? I'm sure the answer is going to be yes. It might take 5%, 10% of the available population, whatever it is. Once we have that, then we have to determine what the proper level of taxes is so that the result will be full employment. So that we will be spending enough money on this government so you all have enough. The amount we spend is enough, lira, right? We're going to get a lira. The amount of lira we spend will be enough for you to pay the tax and fund your savings, the tax and savings. We have to spend that much. If we're not spending enough, how will we know? Unemployment will tell us. All we have to do is count the bodies in the unemployment line, and we're going to change that a little bit also. But that's all we have to do. We don't have to know the number. We don't look at the deficit and say, oh, that's a big number, that's a small number. We look at what's happening in the real world, the functional finance. So we determine the right size of government, and then we set the appropriate level of taxation. And it's going to be a guess. We then have to watch the economy to see if we get it right. In the meantime, we will be offering a transition job, and I'm just going to say now so we have a number to think about, of 10 euros per hour with full benefits to anyone willing and able to work. And we recognize that this is going to draw an enormous amount of the population, maybe 15% of the population immediately will accept this. Because this transition job does two things. It gives you paid work, which is a benefit, but it also gives you a chance to show that you are qualified to be working. And that the private sector can look at you and say, yes, this person qualifies for my company, I would like to hire. The private sector likes to hire people who are already working. It can see if you come in to work on time, if you get along with other people, if you're clean, all kinds of things that are important to an employer. It's very important to private sector employers because they have risk. If they hire somebody who doesn't turn out well, it's a big loss for them. They go through a lot of trouble, bring them on, train them, show them what to do, only to find out they've got some problems. Okay, but if you're already working, you'll be coming to work in this transition job for a week, 2 weeks, 3 months, they can see what type of person you are. You're qualified for what they want, and it works. That's of course we're talking about Argentina, where this program is actually implemented and worked exactly as we expected. Okay, so we'll be offering this transition job, so we'll immediately be full employment. I would announce that all bank deposits in lira will be insured, so you have a safe place to put your money. And you know it's a credible insurance because with the new lira, the government spends just by changing the numbers in your accounts. I would have no government securities at all. Just leave the spending in one account at the central bank, like we talked about yesterday, not have these extra accounts that tie up resources, and they're a substantial source of corruption. Without them, that source of corruption goes away. Banks would be limited to taking in deposits, making loans. Again, eliminating all these other things that public banks do. Remember, banks are public sector, they're not private. Even though there is private capital, they're still agents of government working for public purpose. Okay? Once we have that, we eliminate vast areas of banking that are they're announced, they would go into effect. And then we could watch them. And we would see how many people go into this transition job. And we could see if the private sector is hiring them. And that people in the transition jobs are going away. One of the questions is, how would I get people into these jobs? The first thing I would do is I would authorize all central government agencies to be able to hire as many people as they want, as long as they pay the fixed €10 an hour wage. They would be considered transition jobs. They would expect that they would, so maybe the police department or the schools, the education would hire teachers' assistants. They'd offer €10 an hour. Maybe a lot of people would show up to that job. But they would know that as the economy improves, these people are likely to leave and take high-paying jobs elsewhere in the economy. The police departments might get people helping them. The military may get people to help them. Every department will have the opportunity to offer $10 an hour to anyone who wants to come to work to help them out, knowing that over time these people are likely to get hired away. I would then go down to the next level, the local levels, the regional levels, and allow those governments to do the same thing. They could hire people at €10 an hour that would be funded by the federal government, knowing that at some point in time, most of these people are likely to get jobs in the private sector. They could down another level. If there's still people looking for work, if these other levels still haven't given everyone jobs and these jobs, then you go to what we call the nonprofits, or the charities, or the agencies that are not working for profit, they're just working for public purposes, and allow them to hire. Right now they depend on volunteers, so they allow them to hire anybody they want for $10 an hour. Again, knowing the economy is going to pick up, hopefully very soon, and many of these people will be hired other places for $15 to $20 an hour as business becomes productive. Okay. So by allowing these different levels of government, 1, 2, 3, all the way down to the bottom, the lowest level of local government. Then there's still people looking for work. Those governments are full. Then the nonprofits. I'm reasonably certain that that would take anyone willing and able to work, to have a transition job. Now, what happens in the private sector when we do this? So we've got the government at the right size. We have regular government employees that we hire on the normal government pay scales with the normal benefits. We have a transition job for everyone else. And we have the private sector. So how does the private sector actually work? And why will it expand to take these people into transition jobs? And this is an area that is very much misunderstood. You've got, especially in America, where you see these presidential candidates talking about the importance of small business and how we must give them tax breaks because small business hires 70-80% of the population in the private sector, and how we must eliminate regulation and paperwork. And that's not how small business works. Yes, it's good to eliminate regulation. It's good to make things easier. You don't want obstacles because you don't want obstacles for things that we want to get accomplished. If we want something to be accomplished, we don't want to put obstacles in the way. Okay, so, but let's think about what a small business does. Are some of you small business owners have your own business? They hire people? Yes? Got a few here. Okay. Here we go. We know what small business needs. They need somebody to buy their products at a fair price. If your restaurant is full, you don't lay off the busboy or lay off the waiter and let people go. And if you've got people trying to come in, you might expand and make your restaurant bigger and hire more people. It all depends on sales. If you have a shop, if the shop is full of customers buying things, you don't tell your employees to go because you don't like the paperwork or you don't like the taxes. If you've got customers paying your price, you hire people to take care of your customers. And your price is high enough so you can pay your taxes and do your paperwork. Now again, it's always better not to have obstructions, taxes that are obstructions, paperwork that's obstructions, and I'm completely in favor of streamlining that. But fundamentally, if your store is empty and you have no clients, people don't have enough money to buy what you're trying to sell, it doesn't matter if you have no taxes and no paperwork. You're still not going to have any sales you're still not going to have customers and services, so you're not going to hire anybody. If you have an engineering firm that builds bridges and roads, you're not going to hire anybody if there are no orders. But if you've got contracts to build bridges and roads, you're going to hire people, even if there's a lot of paperwork, even if the taxes are complicated. Yes, we want to get rid of the paperwork, simplify the taxes, but that's not what employment is about. That's not what private sector expansion is about. We can look to China, which has the highest levels of corruption, the highest levels of bureaucracy, paperwork, and complexity. And it's the fastest growing, or at least it was last year, the fastest growing economy in the world. Because there was money to be spent. The government was spending enormous amounts of money employing all kinds of businesses to do all kinds of contracting. And that's what drives employment and output. Would they have been better off without all that complication, regulation, complicated taxes, corruption from top to bottom? Yes, of course they'd be better off. That's a different point. We need to look at these two things separately. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that there are sales, that people who are working for a living have enough money to buy the products they're producing, the goods and services they're producing. And we do that by making sure that for the size of government we have, taxes are at the right level. So if the government's spending all this money, it's taxing some of it, but there's enough money left to spend so that people can buy everything we can produce at full employment, plus everything the rest of the world wants to send. And then small business is thriving because you're competing for consumer dollars, real consumer dollars, excuse me, United States, consumer lira. You're competing for the consumer's lira. Right? Business works, capitalism works by businesses competing for our money, for our income, for our lira. The businesses that compete successfully, that build the goods and provide services that we like, that we approve of, we vote with our spending. They thrive. The ones that don't, they fail. And they should fail because no one wants their products, goods and services. And then they get replaced by new business. Now, why do they get replaced? Because people have money to spend. Other people, entrepreneurs, come up with a business plan that says, you know, there are people with money to spend, and I think they'd like to buy this new iPhone or this new pair of shoes. And then they try to attract investment. You can attract investment if you have good product, but only if that product can be sold. And there has to be people with money to spend to be able to buy your product, to vote for what you're trying to produce. And this happens very, very quickly. You see countries go from nothing, like Argentina, which one night had a total collapse, with 32 dead in the street, to just a few months later where they implemented this exact same transition job, a version of this transition job, and they became the fastest growing, most prosperous country in the world very quickly. That's what I would do the first day. So now let's look at what our relationship is to the rest of the world. If every country in the world suddenly vanished overnight, just disappeared, and only Italy was left, what should Italy do? Should everybody just drop dead? No. You can manage it. You know, you can grow your own food, you can do things. You can certainly do a lot more than ancient Rome did. They had no IMF and no World Bank. They had no euro in Brussels. They had no electricity. They had no bulldozers. They didn't have rebar for the concrete. They were just piling up stones. They built a pretty nice place. It took more than a day, but it turned out fairly nice. And a lot of it's still there. It's still admired thousands of years later. It's all how you organize your labor. If you get up in the morning and see a rock, and you pick it up and you throw it through a window, you've got one kind of society. If you get up in the morning and you see rocks and you start putting it together and you build the Parthenon, you've got a different kind of society. It's all about how you organize your labor. And government, MMT, this whole thing is about organizing labor people from the private sector to the public sector, to the public purpose, to produce the public infrastructure that supports the private sector. It's about organizing things so that people can go to work, build cars, and drive them. Go to work, get paid, have enough money to buy the cars that they drive. Go to work, get paid, have enough money to eat the food that they grow. It's just about organizing the normal activities we go through. Are there limits? Yes. There are severe limits. We are limited by the number of people we have. Once everyone's working, we can't have any more people working. That's it. We can only produce goods and services that are limited to how many people we have to produce them. We can increase our productivity. We can work with machinery so that the same number of people can produce more useful output. And that's what we've been doing every year for a very long time. And that's what makes us wealthier and richer with each generation, able to afford to sit in this room and listen to this talk. There was a time, maybe 200 years ago, where it took everyone to grow all the food. Maybe 1% of the population could be the nobility, but everyone else had to be working. If you all took the day off to sit here, there'd be a problem with the crop. Something would go on. Productivity has improved. Today, in the United States, 1% of the population grows all the food. It's gone from 99% to 1%. And the United States is a net exporter of food. And we burn up 30% of our corn for motor fuel, which is a complete absurdity. But there's still enough food. We produce 8,000 calories a day per person. Between farming and manufacturing, we use less than 10% of the people. Okay, that's all. If we had 1% more manufacturing, all these American politicians, we need more manufacturing. If we had any more manufacturing, this whole room would be filled to the ceiling with junk that nobody would want. Okay, the problem isn't that there's not enough manufacturing to fill the stores. The problem is people don't have the money to buy the things. That's a failure of government, it's a failure of organization. It's not about not having enough manufacturing. Not at all. So what does the other 90% do? Well, that's whatever we want. We're not going to starve, and we're not going to run out of pencils, no matter what those other 90% do, because they're not doing that. Okay, they're teaching school, that's important. They're working on our medical care, that's important. I'm not saying it's not important. But these are political choices as to what we want the other 90% to do. What services do we, for all services, what services do we want performed? How do we want them done? These are legitimate functions of government. Public purpose. We get together and decide what we want to do. Do we want 30% of the people to be stockbrokers and be calling us up 3 times a day to sell us shares of stock? I don't think so. But that's what's happening in the United States. Do we want to put laws on the books that create complicated bookkeeping so that 10% of our people have to be accountants to figure out these own crazy laws and regulations we made? No. We are tying up vast chunks of our population, doing things that I call one person's digging a hole and another one's filling it in. We're creating regulations that require something, and then for example, the income tax system in the United States. It is so complex. Every corporation, every individual has huge amounts of real people doing accounting and record keeping and worrying and talking to tax lawyers and then we have the government has huge bureaucracies working on this. These are all people that could be doing something else if we simplify that system. It's not about saving the money. It's about allocating scarce resources. Human labor is a scarce resource, and it's about how we allocate it. The example I give about why human labor is a scarce resource, I ask people, how many of you need a personal, or would like to have a personal assistant to help you during the day, to take care of all the things you have to do, to sort out your photographs, to help you keep track of your emails. I know I need about 3 personal assistants to help anybody. Everybody in here needs a personal assistant, right? Is there anybody who doesn't need one? Okay. So let's say the government agreed to give everybody enough money to be able to hire a personal assistant. Wouldn't that be nice? Yes, except for one thing. Who would be the personal assistant? We all need one. Who's going to be it? Nobody. We would get no personal assistance because we all need money. We all have enough money. Try and hire the next guy. He's trying to do the same thing you are. The point is, we wake up every morning with a 100% labor shortage. There are more things to do than there are people to do it. Always. Just walk down the streets, you can come up with things to do. I know my wife comes up with far more things to do than I could ever do in a day. So the problem is not the jobs and things to do. The problem is funding. We are starving ourselves for money. Our president has told us the United States has run out of dollars. What does that mean? They spend by changing numbers on the account. Candidate Romney, Governor Romney is saying he's going to look at every expenditure, remembering we have to borrow that money from China. What does that mean? That means we have to make sure China moves their dollars that they got from selling us tires from one account to the Federal Reserve to another. Why do we care about that? Why would that influence anybody? They don't know how it works. None of these people do. Anyway, when I take over as finance minister, there are two things that you need to worry about. Number one, what we would do, what Italy would do at the very top. And that's what I just explained. But then there's also the regional issues. What happens from the region? And the finance minister provides an environment where everyone has jobs, people have enough money to spend, and you have a general prosperity. But then there are very important things you can do at the regional levels as well. And I'm going to leave the regional levels for later and talk about those specifics in my next talk. Thank you very much.
Se vuoi prendere il presentino, questo che mi ha toccato io.
Prendo con me io? Sì, perché avrebbe
Allora,
dovuto a volte.
adesso c'è un intervento dall'alto che necessita di una piccola presentazione.